This is a video about how and why I paint self-portraits. I used to paint them all the time as a teenager when I was really trying to first learn to paint realism, but I fell out of the routine of doing them the past few years and just recently realized how much I was craving the mindset and process, both of which I'll talk about later, that painting a self-portrait specifically gives me. So at this point I've been working for less than half an hour and I'm really focusing just on laying the groundwork. Almost every mark I'm putting down is going to change or move or be covered, but I'm treating all these first marks just as a guide to continue to build off of. You saw at the beginning I started with a sketch of the head with those light red lines, and then I progressively made them a bit darker as I became more confident that I had approached where they were actually supposed to be. And then I came in pretty quickly with these just large, loose blocks of color. There is so much detail in the face and it can get so complicated, so at these early stages, I'm actually actively trying to ignore a lot of things. I'm actively ignoring things like my eyelashes, or like the 10 different shades of red in my lip, or even things like my pupils. The pupils are in there now, but it did take me a while to add them. I started instead just with the larger shapes that make up the eye socket, like the shadow under the brow bone and where the bags of the eye are, and then only after I had an idea of those larger shapes that make up the eye did I go in and place that smaller dark smudge for the pupil and that lighter brushstroke for the eyelid, etc. I do this because it's a lot easier to get a few simple things right than it is to get 100 details right. And if you spend time at the beginning making sure the simple things are right, those big shapes, then you've effectively created for yourself this map on which you can eventually build up and find all the smaller shapes and details within more accurately. Which is basically what you'll see me be trying to do for the rest of the video, trying to build up to something that actually looks like me. It does take a while, it definitely took me some searching. Everything about the face keeps moving around for a while, but I eventually find my likeness, or at least get close, and I was pretty relieved when I did. These stages where things aren't quite right yet, I do find a bit uncomfortable, you know. We don't like to see our own faces not quite right. Anyways, this is actually connected to the first thing I find valuable about painting self-portraits, and that is the pressure of accuracy and specificity that painting your own face puts on you. Day 3. This section of my hair is way too short. I think this cheek is coming out way too far that way. My chin is wrong, my neck is definitely wrong, and my shoulders look like they're way too high up. Like it looks like I'm like a turtle. Okay, so the pressure of accuracy. Basically, you get really strong feedback from a self-portrait. It is painfully obvious if it looks like you or if it doesn't, and you won't be satisfied if it's wrong. We feel so attached to our own faces, and it's quite uncomfortable to see our faces in a distorted or inaccurate way. And this just makes you very in tune with if you're doing a quote-unquote good job or not, like if you are capturing your likeness adequately. Unlike with other objects that I might not feel as much emotional attachment to, I personally feel very little wiggle room with a portrait, so I do very little exaggerating or taking artistic liberties. I guess to put it succinctly, I feel a real lack of freedom when I'm painting a face. It becomes not about my own artistic expression or ideas, and it becomes much more just about being truthful to what or who I am seeing. Now, lack of freedom might sound bad, and sometimes it is, which is exactly why I stopped doing these for a few years in favor of subjects that would make me feel more free in terms of how I was depicting them. You know, subjects with which I wasn't going to be offended if it didn't look exactly like what I was observing. Clearly, though, I've come back to this for a reason. 2 reasons, actually. First, I think prioritizing truthfulness to what or who you are seeing above your own expression or ideas is very often a good thing. Very often the thing you are seeing is actually much better than your own inclinations or ideas, to put it frankly. Second reason, which is a bit less firm, more of a theory I suppose, is that I have a lot of freedom in my life right now. I mean, just painters in general have a lot of freedom in how you can literally make anything you want. You know, as long as it obeys the laws of physics and whatnot. And then there's the aspect of if you are working for yourself and don't have a boss, that's a whole nother realm of freedom, and I love all that, but, and it's a big but, sometimes being able to do whatever you want, being able to make literally anything you want, however you want,
it's too much. It's too many options, and sometimes I just want to participate in something where I am bound to very specific rules, I guess. And for me, I feel that most when doing portraits, when trying to accurately capture a strict likeness, hence why I'm doing this. And I got a lot from it, not only in how it satisfied this desire, but also just artistically. I think having a strict rule set that you are aligning yourself to can enforce a lot of focus, which the downside to focus is that it can turn into blinders and make it impossible for you to ever see other options or grow in other potentially fruitful directions, which is dangerous and a shame. But also focus definitely helps you to just produce good quality work in whatever specific realm or lane you are in, and that's an extremely good thing. This process also just really reminded me of how powerful a continual study of something is. A lot of times when I'm painting, there's a certain point where I start to care less about the reference and much more just about the painting as its own thing. It's not really in my nature to ever completely ignore the reference, but especially when I'm approaching the end of something like a still life or a landscape, I'm definitely judging the painting as its own thing rather than comparing it to and making sure it perfectly aligns with whatever the original thing was. In this case of the self-portrait though, that does not happen. I'm always going back to my reference up until the very end, and because of this, I ended up studying and interrogating the reference, my face, to a significantly greater extent than I might normally do, and I think that's a really helpful practice to be in. Even if you aren't going to copy the reference exactly in your painting, I do think it is almost always helpful to look at it, to interrogate it more than you already are. There is just always more to see and understand about your subject, and painting this self-portrait was a really good reminder of that. This brings me to the second big reason I find self-portraits to be so valuable, and that is the connection you have with yourself. You are literally plopped in front of a mirror, staring, making eye contact with yourself for a very long period of time. Now, at risk of sounding totally conceited, I love this. It is not a normal thing we get to do. Normally when we look in a mirror, it's to get ready in the morning, make sure we look presentable. We are looking so that we can fine-tune the ways in which we want to present ourselves to others. For painting a portrait though, the looking in the mirror is much more about just observing what's actually there. It's not about fixing something about your appearance or presenting yourself in a certain way, it's just looking to look, to see what's there. And in doing that, you can really learn about yourself. I discovered, for example, that my left eyelid, it's kind of saggy now. I'm 26, I wouldn't say that's something I'm happy about, but I do really enjoy being aware of it. I want to know what I'm working with. I want to understand the way I'm progressing throughout life. And it goes deeper than just noticing physical things about yourself. I do think it actually puts you in a mindset of self-study, of being honest with yourself, similar to how journaling or writing about your life might also do. And from that comes so much self-awareness, and you are just able to know yourself better. Now, that being said, while this feeling of connection is very real, there is also sometimes a potent, though temporary, feeling of disconnect I can have with a subject while painting. Let me explain. When you are doing an observational painting of anything, you are going around breaking your subject down into two-dimensional shapes of color. My best tip I could offer for anyone trying to do an observational portrait painting is actually to forget that you are looking at a face. Forget what it is and just think of it in terms of the shapes of colors that you see. This will force you to move on from whatever cartoonish concepts you have of what you think an eye looks like or a nose looks like, and will help you to just actually see them for what they are. Now, in doing this to your own face, you are quite literally objectifying yourself. You are thinking of yourself as a physical thing and ignoring all the internal workings that make you you. I hate how that sounds, though I do think it is a true description of how I paint. There is redemption though. Despite how all that sounds, there's always a point, maybe a few days after I've finished the portrait and have had some distance from it, where I'll look at it and actually connect with it. Similarly to how I was connecting to myself while looking in the mirror. I'll have this feeling of whoa, that's me. And I'll see myself in it, more than just my physical self. I'll see my whole self in it. And it's odd to me that my process of painting I just described, it can sound quite calculated or cold, but through that process, the final image can have a lot of warmth and humanity in it. we can't help but connect with things that look like us. And that's awesome. It's an awesome feeling to see yourself in something other than yourself. I am approaching the end now. I got frustrated around this time because I felt like the marks I was making were taking the image further away from me rather than closer, which is when you know it's definitely time to stop.
I don't want to look at my face anymore for like a month.
I did feel like that at the time, but I ended up painting another one literally the week after. Despite those frustrations, this was one of the most valuable things I had done for my painting practice in a long time, for all the reasons I just shared. And yeah, I couldn't get enough. It really got me to look quite closely, which I would encourage everyone to do.